Today's episode will take a deep dive into co-directing with the talented Nelms Brothers, who have written and directed numerous award-winning films that include Fatman, Small Town Crime, to their latest film, Red Right Hand, with Orlando Bloom, Andy McDowell, and Garrett Dillahunt. Welcome to the show, Ian and Eshom.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful to be here, Tammy. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just can't wait to find out how you started from playing with G.I. Joe to directing and writing films together.
We're still playing with the G.
I don't know how far we've come, to be honest. Like how that journey happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are brothers. Sounds like you have a really close relationship. And I was just kind of curious, like, what made you decide to say, hey, we should write and direct some films?
Absolutely. Well, we'll try to make this quick because this would probably be the whole podcast in itself. But I think we lived out in the country. It was very rural. Our parents have a penchant for nature and animals. But it was either get along or be really lonely. And so we got along. One of the things that we bonded over with our parents, our mom is a very movie fanatic, but she had the Clint Eastwood collection, like a new Dirty Harry classic would show up every week on VHS, and we would just like
Devour them.
Wear them out. And then that led to us walking into town, which was 2 miles away, and we would rent out the local video store and get a dozen donuts, and that was our weekend after we finished our chores. And then that sort of, that was like our younger years, like, maybe between like 12 to 16.
Never thinking that movie making or writing or directing or acting or any of that was any kind of profession that we didn't know anybody that was doing any of that. It just seemed like this far away Hollywood land.
So then Ian went off to college. He's an amazing wrestler. Ian fell in love with literature and writing while he was in college. And then I dinked around in arts in junior college for a few years. I got a couple of AA degrees. I was trying to become a professional paintball player at the time. Realized that's probably not the most fruitful career despite my love for the game. And then ended up getting an art scholarship because that's far more reliable. And went to art school for a year and then wasn't having a great time with that as much as I love art. And I remember coming back home from the summer, being sort of disenchanted with art school. Ian was loving life in his theater program and writing plays and all this stuff. And he was like, what we should do is like write a movie. And I was like, that's insane. Could we really do that? And there was one formidable instance that happened before that where I was in Kansas City, Ian was in Bakersfield, California, going to college, and we both watched 2 movies one night. And we had a love of cinema, obviously, but we had this transformative experience where Ian had watched 2 movies in Bakersfield. I'd watched the 2 movies in Kansas City, and we called each other the next morning. He called me, and he was like, dude, I watched these 2 amazing movies last night. You won't believe it. And I was like, I watched 2 movies last night. And they were the Real Blonde and Barfly. And for whatever reason, they flipped a switch in our brains because they were independent cinema. We could actually like see the dialogue being written. We could like envision our friends in these environments and ourselves.
It wasn't like you were Indiana Jones and you were like in the Middle East somewhere running around trying to find the Ark, but you were in a bar, for most of the movie and an apartment and a hotel room. You could see it. You could see the movie, and you had like 4 characters in Barfly or something. Like you could just kind of see the movie being made. You're like, oh, this isn't overwhelming, And
our dad,
Right.
We're blessed that our dad is a very accomplished photographer. He was shooting a bunch of like local, like whether it be Spanish language commercials or car lots or whatever with like his small town video editing equipment and his team. And we like borrowed a bunch of that stuff of that equipment and like ran out and started making some like really bad short films. And that's where the love started, It was like, hey, we want to like, I remember like one of the guys at work said he was going to like edit us into Predator. And that was like our dream come true. So he like edited, like we shot all this stuff in our parents' backyard with us like in camouflage trying to edit us into Predator. And then we just like, we got into college, we started writing scripts. They weren't great at first. And we got better and better at the craft. And we took the plunge. We moved to Los Angeles. I got rear-ended in a car accident. Instead of fixing my car, we took the money and we bought the DVX 100 camcorder and we just started shooting guerrilla movies all over LA with our friends.
And so our first feature film, we landed in LA in 2002. And then we were like, okay, well, how do we get these scripts going? We started meeting some people because everybody in LA is in the business in some way. You can't throw a rock without hitting 25 people that are trying to be this or trying to be that or know this person or an assistant of something or other. So we were like, okay, well, we started getting people to read some of our scripts, and they were just like, giving us notes, and as you do, and trying to help us.
Yeah.
And we were just like, well, I think the reason they don't see the brilliance is because we've never made the movie. So we got to make a movie. And so we gathered $1,500 and we wrote a script and shot a full feature film for $1,500.
I don't know if that one was a proof of concept just yet.
Nothing.
But proof we could go make a film.
It proved we could make a film. It got into a couple of film festivals, and the most notable one being the Palm Beach International Film Festival, which at the time was a top 20 film festival in North America. And we were like, holy cow, we got into a big film festival with our $1,500 movie. We flew over there. We watched the movie for its 2 screenings in a 250-seat movie theater.
I think we had 25.
And I think there were 50 people in the first screening and like 20 people in the second screening.
Which was, by the way, the biggest audience we'd ever had at that time, like watching the film.
We couldn't believe there were 50 people in there or 20 people watching the movie. Because otherwise it was us with our parents or us with our friends in their living room. And we were watching the movie with them, and people were laughing in the right places, and then we instantly got self-conscious about the movie and went home and cut 10 minutes out of it after that film festival because we were like, it's running too slow. So, like, we learned a ton just watching with the audience and just learned a ton on making our first film. It was a crew of 3 people, me, Eshom, and my dad, and then we cast 5 friends that we worked with. I worked at Tony Roma's, A Place for Bibs. Esh worked at the ArcLight Cinemas, and so in LA, the people we worked with were actors and writers and directors. And so we cast 5 actors, 5, struggling actors, hungry actors to come out and work with us. And we spent 7 days out in the woods shooting this movie. There was a sort of, what do we call it? A comedic thriller. It was more of a dramatic thriller with some comedic undertones.
But that was what got us off, and then we decided we wanted to make another one. So we rounded up a few of our more talented friends, the ArcLight or Tony Roma's or wherever, and we went off and made a collaborative movie like Robert Altman's Shortcuts. We're like, we're each going to do like a 15-minute section, and then we'll edit it together. So we did that movie. That was called Night of the Dog, and that one went back and it ended up winning all the festivals that we just barely got into before. So we were like selling it out and winning audience awards. It was like this pretty amazing moment.
That was a $5,000 feature film. And so
wow.
From the $5,000 feature film, we had like Focus Feature call us, and they were talking about going big with it. They ended up not doing it, mainly because I think the production level was so low.
It was scrappy.
It was super entertaining, but it was very independent. And that's the one thing we had, is that we could see that our writing was working. We could see that our editing was working. We could just see that the film was starting to come together and becoming an entertaining piece of something.
Yeah, it wasn't like a pat on the head because you had made a movie. It was like, people were actually like laughing and responding and being like, you should make more of these.
There were things that worked about the first one. First one sounded like Squirrel Trap. There were things that worked with Squirrel.
Oh man, we're going way back.
I know. There were things that worked with Squirrel Trap, but it wasn't like we had a lot of problems. We could just tell by we were watching our writing and watching our character development and watching the story unfold. And it was only a 72-minute film. So we were like, this is like a long short. Exactly. So the next one, Night of the Dog, I think ended up being like a 90-minute movie, 89-minute movie. But it was a rowdy comedy. We just decided to try to leave it all on the table for as much as we could with our budget. But we were very crass. We were very aggressive. We were
running around the streets of Los Angeles in our underwear, shooting guerrilla style,
and we just had a blast shooting it because we shot with all
of our best friends at the time. Were all out there running around shooting it. It was amazing.
And so there were 6 of us, and the other 5 would crew on the other person's movie, and that's how we had a team to shoot it. And we were literally running, 600 feet of extension cord from people's apartments across streets at 3:00 in the morning and shooting a scene with a light. Out in the middle of the road with cops driving by going like, what in the hell are you guys doing? We're like, oh, we're just shooting this little movie. And even though we're in Burbank and they should be shutting us down, they're like, we're going to drive around the block, which is going to take about 25 minutes. You guys need to be gone. We're like, okay. And the reason they gave us 25 minutes is so we could finish shooting.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's sweet.
It was sweet. Yeah.
Because we were an intimate production, but we were just shooting our asses off. And we would finish up those scenes and get the hell out of there because heeding their warning. And I don't even know if they ever really came back by, because it was right next to someone's apartment, and we never saw them come back by. They were putting everything away. But But yeah, we just got a lot of nice lucky breaks from police and people,
friends.
friends. But we shot it for $5,000. It got into and won a ton of
We got representation from that movie.
We got representation from that movie. We won a big award at Santa Barbara Film Festival with that movie. So things started kind of hitting right then, and we started realizing, okay, I think we could do this. And then we wrote a movie. We wrote a bunch of movies that were bigger, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, one that was like probably a bazillion million. And we were just like, we're never going to get that one going. You realize real quick, like, oh man, we shouldn't have written the bazillion million movie. You're like, why did we have that movie?
We should have written Mad Max first.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, we're talking like Fury Road Mad Max, not like
that's what we
George
wrote
Miller's
first.
original.
Yeah, we wrote Fury Road first. It was just like way too big, way too crazy. No one's going to let us make it. No one's going to trust us to make it. They just thought we were insane. And so then we started writing down a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller, and we built ourselves a little ladder to sort of get back up into the movies, you know, with the bigger budgets, with the effects, with the action that we were excited about making. And so it went after Night of the Dog. We wrote a movie called Lost on Purpose, which was
a love letter to our hometown. We shot it in Visalia, California, which is where we're from.
About a dairy owner.
Call it a dairy epic.
Yeah, it was a dairy epic. And we raised $200,000 to shoot that one.
Wow.
And then had like a 30-person crew, pulled in every favor that we had with actor or person with an extra $5,000.
I mean, it was so dire straits that we were calling in people that had crushes on my mom in high school to lend us things in our hometown.
Oh wow!
And luckily they were very
Way to go.
They were there to help.
Yeah, the community wrapped itself around us. Like we had working dairy farms that we were like living on basically, you know, for a month shooting. Because we needed a working dairy farm for that film. So when we would get it budgeted, they'd be like, you can't do this for any less than $2 or $3 million. You have all these cows, and you got a working dairy farm, and you got like, there's a lot of production here. And then we just went back to our hometown and just started asking people, you know, if this thing is financially successful, can we just come up with some kind of contract to cut you in for a point or two, you know? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. They were just excited that it was a positive film about dairy farming in our community.
So that one, it got into some film festivals, and Ian and I did some publicity on it, and we talked about...
We won like... We got into like 30 film festivals or something like that, and we won like 20 B-plus film festivals. Not
that's great.
We did not get into like a Sundance or a South by, but we got into like Palm Beach again.
Like
Tallgrass, which was a great festival.
I can't remember.
The Real Heart in Canada. Like we got into a ton of like B-plus film festivals that people have heard of, and you want to play your film there, but they don't have a film market attached to them. You know what I mean? You're not going to sell your film to Paramount out of there or Sony Classics out of there. You need 20 of those wins before they go,
right.
Oh, you want 20 film festivals? Okay, maybe we'll take a look at it. Send it into the acquisitions department.
And then we just learned a bunch of like guerrilla marketing techniques, and I came up with some ideas on how maybe the film festival circuit could be more sustainable for filmmakers trying to do that.
Wrote a couple articles on the Wrap about it, which was really fun.
And then from those Wrap articles, someone's read those and made a film festival around them. The ideas that we presented in the article.
They basically made a film festival about the ideas that we wrote about in the Wrap. And a year later, they had that film festival. They said, we really want to play your movie. We're like, amazing, yes. And so we let them have our movie. They played it in there, Lost on Purpose. And then someone saw it in that festival and said, hey, we have $500,000. Will you take a look at this book we have the rights to shoot it? And we said, yes. We read it. It was our next movie, Waffle Street. Read the book. They said, we pitched some more ideas. Here's what we would do. They already had a script, but it was like a $20 million
script that had been bouncing around LA and through development hell for a few years.
Yeah. And so the woman who wrote it, Autumn McAlpin, wrote the script and had the rights, was like, hey, I really want to do this movie, but like I need what you guys did here.
How did you pull off this what they said was an $8 million movie for $250,000?
Yeah. How did you get all this cast for $200,000? How did you shoot it for that? How did you get 30 days of shooting? Like, how did you pull all that off? And so we just kind of ran down how we did it. And they were like, can you do this movie for $500,000 with that same philosophy? And we're like, I think so.
But our only stipulation was like, hey, look,
because they said we really like your ideas. We want you to rewrite the script. Can you do your rewrite on it to get it down to $500,000? And we were like, yeah, we'll do it. But the only stipulation is you got to make it.
You got to promise us you're going to make it.
Yeah.
So we'll rewrite it for free, but you got to promise us you're going to make it.
Yeah, because they didn't really have any money for us to write it, but they did have the money sitting in the bank to go make it. So we were like, yes, we will do it if you guys promise us you'll make it. They promised us they'll make it. And then literally within 3 months after we wrote it, we were in Utah shooting it.
Which never happens.
which never
Yeah.
happens.
Wow.
And so then we made Waffle Street. We came back. It was our clean routine movie. So just a little story. Can we cuss on this, by the way?
Yes.
I don't want to, but I think I heard earlier.
Please do.
Clip. So
I love it.
We had made Lost on Purpose, which is about 5 young dairy ranch hands, and it had a lot of profane language in it. And I remember our father watched it and he said, boy, pretty good, but can you use any other word than the F-bomb? And so we were like, well, let's see. And so when Waffle Street came along, we're like, well, maybe we can make like a clean routine movie that Dad would be proud of. We made Waffle Street, and that one went out and did fairly well. It was like Netflix had.
It was number 1 on Netflix for quite a while.
Netflix had this huge subscriber base, and they had no content. And so there lands Waffle Street, and it's just getting a crazy views. It's on the front page for like weeks. It just did incredible viewership on that platform. And the producers were so stoked with that they came back to us and they said, hey, do you guys have anything else? And we were like, holy smokes. Like we'd been writing all these crime thrillers the whole time. And we're like, man, maybe one day we'll get to make these. And we said, yeah, we do. And so Waffle Street is about a billionaire hedge fund manager that gets sacked for nefarious trading, and then he goes to redeem his soul working at a Waffle House. And he's mentored life lessons by Danny Glover. So it's very different than the crime thrillers that we had been writing. And so we said, yeah, we've got some more movies, but they're nothing like Waffle Street. So
they're like, that's okay. That's all right.
Take a read and see if you're down.
And they read Small Town Crime. They really liked it. And they said, hey, I think we have a financier that wants to put, some money into this if you guys can cast it up. And so we immediately went out to everybody we knew and everything we knew and said, hey, would you play this part? Would you play that part? The first person we approached was Octavia Spencer because we'd known her for, I think, 10 years at that point.
Yeah.
Just through mutual friends. And she was, when we met her, she was struggling actress and we were struggling filmmakers. And by the time we caught up with that film,
she had already won an Oscar.
She won an Oscar and was trying to produce some things. And one of them, we were writing a project for her, and so we sat down to just do a creative discussion. And she was like, "What are y'all working on?" We just finished the movie Waffle Street. She's like, "Let me see the trailer." She's like, "Oh my God, you got Danny Glover! I love Danny Glover." She got really pumped up. She loved the trailer. She's like, "Guys, this looks great. What else? What are you doing next?" And we were like, "Well, we've got this crime thriller that actually we just got funded, but we need cast on it." She's like, "Let me read it. Let me do. You know, I love crime thrillers." She like loves crime. So we like passed it to her. She read it within like 48 hours. Called us and was like, "Okay, I'm in. I'm EPing this thing. Like, who y'all want for this star? And can I play a cop or something? Because I think that'll help us get some cash to make it." And we were like, Nash and I went back, thought about it, and we said, what do you think about, because we had some ideas and we'd all landed on like John Hawkes for the lead.
Yes, he's great.
He's amazing. We really wanted to work with him. We thought he'd be great. Octavia thought he'd be great. And he was the one that we were all like kind of circling around. And we hadn't gone out to him yet. But we were like, we came back to her and we said, okay, what do you think about playing John Hawkes' sister in the movie? And Octavia's like, how's that going to work? And we're like, well, what if we change it to where, because it was originally just a brother and sister, and we were like, what if we change it to where this black family adopts this white kid and he grows up and fucks up their lives and is a complete disaster, kind of the antithesis to what crazy, adoption story you usually hear, right?
Yeah. And everyone thought it was going to be like The Jerk or something. I remember John read it and I was like, what?
Maybe it's my sister.
Yeah, Octavia sent him a note and was like, hey, John, I think you'd be great for this. We're going to play brother and sister, like give it a read. And he's like, what is this going to be? Like, what's the tone of this movie?
And so he read it, really enjoyed it. We sat down with him. He's like, I'm so excited to do this movie. Like, let's go. And then Octavia was like, who do you want to play my husband? And we were like, huge Anthony Anderson fans. And she's like, okay, I actually know Anthony. Anthony and I get our nails done at the same salon. And we're like, oh, really? So she goes, I'm going to hit him up. And they didn't meet at the salon. She met him at some party somewhere. And she was just like, hey, I've got this script. Take a read. John and I are going to do it. Like, we'd love to have you do this. The guys are pumped to have you do this part, playing my husband. And so he read it. We talked to him on the phone. He was game. And that was kind of our trifecta. And with those three people, they ended up giving us like $1.9 million to go make the movie.
And then we ended up premiering it at South by Southwest and was sold out of that festival. This was amazing.
It's at that
It
festival.
was like honestly like the most surreal moment. Had an amazing screening there, like a dream come true screening. And then from there, we didn't know what we were going to make next. we had
these scripts.
we had Fatman. We'd written it, but everyone was like,
This is crazy.
"Who on earth is going to make this? This is
No crazy Santa.
I feel like half the meetings we would get on that script, people were just like, "Who are these lunatics that are going to walk through the door?" And then but ultimately what happened was we had made Small Town Crime so we could point to a sort of a tonal reference.
And that was one of the problems we were having. We wrote that script like in 2005 or 2006, Fatman. And we had gotten a ton of meetings off of it because people really enjoyed the script, or at least, like I said, want to see the maniacs that walked through the door that had written it. And they were like, we really enjoyed the script, but like,
It's your execution dependent.
you're not going to be able to direct this because it's director dependent, execution dependent. Or like, what does that mean? They're like, you have to have something to show what the tone is. You have to show like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Because you read the script and it's fun, but you're like, what does that even look like when it's made? So you have to have something to show us this is what it's going to look like. So we're like, okay, we make Small Town Crime, and then
That was the closest we had to a tonal.
yeah, and thank goodness the tone is similar enough that they were like, what is the tone of this in meetings? And we'd be like, it's like that. It's like Fatman's like Small Town Crime. Like, oh, okay, now we get it. And so like every meeting we took after Small Town Crime, people were like, oh, and then that movie was taken very seriously because people ended up enjoying the tone of Small Town Crime. So like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. We see what this is now. And then we got the movie made. Nadine Barros over at Fortitude International took the jump with us. We got Mel, we got Walton Goggins, we got Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and man, away we went. And
I
it was
know.
like,
Mel Gibson was perfect for that role. I just watched it the other night, and
awesome.
such a great spin on Santa. I loved it, and also Walton. He's one of my favorites.
He's a rock
he's
star.
Just so he's to me he's like a Sam Rockwell, a little different, but
Totally agree.
You just hit two
phenomenal.
of like three of our all-time favorite actors.
You did.
Sam Rockwell, Walton, Mel.
Yeah, it was really cool. I really loved the movie, and I loved the spin on it, and just like Santa's at the bar. And I love how he takes a shot and he puts what is that? The Pepto
Alka-Seltzer.
Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah, for us, it was funny. Like when we sat down with Mel, we said, Mel, these are the bits in between what you've seen in every other Santa movie. So like he's not, we're not going to see him sliding down people's chimneys and doing all that stuff. Like this is like when he goes home and he's hanging out with his wife. Like those are the scenes we're going to see in this.
Yeah, and we knew Mel was the right guy. We sat down with him, and he said, the one comment he said right off the bat is he's like, this, I really want to point to this scene where I'm trying to talk to my elves, and I'm trying to tell them that, like, we're going to have to do this military contract. He's like, the way I want to play that is he's like, I just feel like I should be in tears, almost in tears, trying to tell them that because of how heartbreaking it is. And he goes, and that's what I think is what's going to be so funny about it. And we're all, exactly, like, you get it. Like, exactly. Like those layers, he spoke in layers like that with the script that we were super excited about because it was how we were perceiving it. And to have him just read it and get that right off the bat was really exciting.
And we would tell him, and he'd be like, what's wild about this movie is Santa's the most grounded character in the whole thing.
He is. Or he was. Yeah.
Right.
So why don't we talk about you both as co-directors and co-writers? How do you work on set? Does one of you work with the actors, the other works with crew? Do you split up the responsibilities? How do you flow in co-directing? And then when people are on set, who are they talking to? Do they talk to both of you, or do people go to one, not the other? Like, sure. How does that work?
Also, the process starts in the writing process for us. So especially all the ones that we write and direct, of course, together. It starts in the writing process because when we're putting it down on a page, we don't put something down unless we both understand what that looks like. You know what I mean? Like we'll talk it out, we'll put it down.
So yeah, sometimes the other one might have to act it out for them.
Right. And sometimes if it is like, well, what the hell are you talking about? And then, I don't like that line. And you say, well, what if the line was delivered like this? And like, ooh, okay, yeah, I like that. So it's a lot of that as we're writing. And so we have a pretty good synced up mind's eye on what it's going to look like. And then Eshom, thankfully, is a storyboard artist, was a professional storyboard artist for a very long time. And he will storyboard out the entire film, every frame, whether someone's walking down the street or two people sitting across from each other, it is storyboarded out. And that just doesn't always stay that way perfectly, but it gives us a great framework and gets us completely synced up on what it should look like and how the shot's going to line up and where a person starts and finishes. And then it's easy for us to translate to crew and cast of like, hey, here's what we're thinking. Now, that doesn't mean Walton Goggins isn't going to walk on set and be like, okay, I know I'm supposed to go ABC. What if I go ADBQRXZY? What do you think of that one? And we're like, sounds awesome. Go for it. You know, like he'll show us what he wants to do, and it's exciting because he's adding a lot, and Mel's added it. But you want these actors that are additive to the process. You don't want to go out there and just shoot a comic book. You want to go out there and shoot their version of that comic book. You know what I mean? Some really exciting moments that they're adding into there.
Yeah, I also think that for us, we always say this, like, you know, and yeah, we know obviously not this we got forbid, but like if one of us was hit by a bus on the way to set, the other one should be able to just pick up the reins and go, right? So I remember John Hawks, like, he came to us one day and he was like, hey, Ian, come here. And he pulls Ian aside and he asks him a very deep question about some character layer. At the end, he said he came over to me and he asked me the same question, unbeknownst to us. He didn't know we were doing this.
He told us this at the Q&A after the first screen.
Yeah.
He told this story.
Oh, wow.
And we gave him the exact same answer. And he's like, that's when I knew we were going to be, that they were so synced up in this journey that we weren't going to have any conflict.
He said that was on like day 2 of shooting. So he was just testing us out just to see if, like, are we really synced up? You know, is there going to be some kind of confrontation between the two of us where we're slugging it out down the road?
Right.
But thankfully, you know, we're definitely we try to get as synced up and as lined up as possible so that, like I said, if for some reason, which happens all the time, an actor walks up to one of us instead of both of us, you know, I'm off doing something or Ash is off doing something else, and because you know you can't always have both of us there all the time either. Even if it's just as simple as I go to the restroom at a different time than Eshom, you know, like
I'm going to grab some Skittles off the table.
Right, I'm not always there next to him, hip to hip, you know, sewn together. So it's just inevitable that people are going to end up asking, even if it's crew, well, how do you want to light this, or Johnny or DP, how are we going to frame this? How's this going to come together? Or where do you want to start with this? Like you always end up having at least a few moments where someone asks one of us, and you always hopefully get the same exact answer out of us.
Yeah.
And if we ever have a conflict on how something's playing or how something's going, we literally just huddle behind the monitor for 2 seconds before we go talk to that person. You know, it's like, I'll go tell him this or whatever. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I thought we were doing this. And it's like, oh, okay, great, boom, we're off, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like,
tell him that too, right?
Right. And at times, right, it's like, oh, maybe tell him this too. Okay, great. Well, wait, maybe you should tell him that since it's your note or whatever. You know, we work it out to where it's like,
we really approach you with, you know, no ego. Try to smash all
this as possible, because if somebody gets worried that if you're co-directing with somebody and somebody's getting worried that the other person is talking to it just doesn't matter. It really doesn't. As long as you're synced up, it doesn't matter, you know?
I love that. Your latest film, Red Right Hand, which was written by Jonathan Easley.
Yeah.
How did you get this opportunity to direct this film? And also, it's different because you usually write and direct your own films. How was it taking somebody else's script?
Yeah. It was an awesome experience. First off, it was a fantastic experience. But I will say, we'd done it a couple times before. One of them, feature-wise, is on screen, which is Waffle Street. So Waffle Street came as a script. We did a page 1 rewrite on it, but there's a lot of what Autumn put in there. You know what I mean? And we share screen credit with her for that very, very simple fact. A lot of her stuff is in there. All the really cool stuff that she thought of how to put something that was so anecdotal in the book together as a flowing script is in there, because she thought of some great stuff. So, but in that process was similar with Easley, but I'd say less. We didn't do like a page 1 restart on Jonathan.
I mean, Jonathan did the revisions and we worked through him.
Yeah, we talked to him about him and he wanted to be the one doing the revision, so he did a big revision. The only thing we did was we did a pass right before we shot, like kind of a director's pass. Because at times when you're writing, like, let's say action sequences down, they're not always beat for beat how you're going to shoot them. You know what I mean? Like Jonathan will do a pass and we're like, hey, we've discussed with him and chatted about, hey, maybe it goes this way, maybe it goes that way. He runs over a hill, he does this, blah, blah, blah. But John is not sitting there going like wide angle, close up, you know, like and at times we will literally get in there and get that granular. But what we do is we beat it out. It's like, he runs here, he does this. And every time we start a new line, it's a new shot. You know what I mean? So it's like boom, 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 boom. And
I guess there's like a cadence and a pace to our screenplays that help us in the translation.
So we went in there and spent a few weeks just going through every scene and making sure we knew how we were going to shoot it and how it read and how it played, which everyone was fine with. So yeah, and sometimes there's a little expansion and maybe a line's added or whatever because we didn't realize there was going to be an extra beat there or whatever, you know.
But I still will say, it's like the second we read Jonathan's script,
we were pumped.
We were thrilled. We wanted to make it. We loved the characters. They leapt off the page. His dialogue was excellent. The story progressed nicely. there was a couple little tweaks that a few tweaks that we worked on with him in a rewriting process.
And a lot of times in a writing process, it's tough because you have a writer that's written something that he's excited about and he thinks it's perfect, or he can't.
And for this,
see it the way you're.
it might be perfect.
Yeah.
But there's a translation that we have to do as the filmmakers, and we might have a slightly different perspective or what we think we can pull off.
Or how we would pull it off, right? Even if it's the same dialogue and the same actions in there, we see it through a camera differently than the writer would. So you have to kind of get in there and muss with a little bit so that everybody knows what you're shooting and how you're shooting it.
And Jonathan Easley is by far one of the greatest top 5 collaborators we've had in the co-writing process.
Because there have been
the rewriting process.
There have been times where you're in the rewrite and like we were saying, the writer's quite smitten with what he's written, and that's fine. But when you give a change or a note, they kind of half-ass the note because their heart's not in it. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily they're trying to half-ass it. They're just kind of like, yeah, is this kind of what you wanted? It's not like Jonathan was in there literally writing things and solving problems when problems were coming up.
Because we'd give them notes that would kind of a ripple effect, right? They're like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then down, 20 pages later, that's not going to align exactly with what had been previously.
Things had to change. So like Jonathan would get ahead of that and be like, okay, so I fixed this and this because this affected that. And we're like, all right, awesome. This guy's in it to win it. And it was always really well written. Like he always came with his A game. There was never a draft or an attempt on something that we thought that he kind of just
phoned it in.
Yeah, just phoned it in because he wasn't excited about it. He really gave us we would sit there and talk with him until we were all excited about it. And he's like, okay, I think I got it. Let's go. And then he would just give it 110%. And every time we were really excited with even the things that he brought to what we were hoping.
Yeah, we didn't think he'd do that.
Oh man, that was great. Where'd you think of that? So it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun doing the rewrite with him.
And it's always good to work with people, and because we're all in it to win it.
Exactly.
So it's great when everybody has that kind of attitude going in versus letting ego dictate, which can bring you over there.
And look, we're writers as well. So, like when we write something and we get it on the page, we're excited about it. So if someone were to come to us, we're very empathetic because we can see that if someone came to us and was like, hey, I'm going to direct this now, and, I killed the cat, and I got rid of the car, and I want to ride a skateboard. You're like, whoa, wait, what? It instantly flips so many things in your head, and you're looking down the line, and you just get possibly less excited about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yeah,
we get
totally.
it. We get it.
Where was this film shot? How many shooting days, and what was the budget?
We shot in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep. In, bourbon country. So literally in Knob Creek.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Where that bourbon's made. And then we had a 35-day shooting schedule, which by the time we were shooting was 33, and by the time we finished became 31 and a half. And the problem was weather.
Yeah.
Oh.
Shooting in Kentucky in the spring is a volatile beast.
It can be rough, and we ended up hitting some rough seas, tornadoes. Literally touched down in cities and places that we had just left because of the warnings. Lightning storms, rainstorms that are so intense that lightning strikes are hitting 20 feet away from the crew.
Obviously, they're in shelter, so that's why.
Right, but but you can't shoot.
You're not shooting.
Shoot with giant antennas and lights up because it's just dangerous. So, yeah, that was a really frustrating part of it. Is that because when you're shooting a 35-day schedule that gets whittled down to 33, you're super tight, and then it's like, okay, now you're going to lose another day and a half, and it's like, well. How? How is that without losing scenes that you need vitally?
So what it really forced us to do is become very, very accurate in what we were shooting and very efficient in the time in which we were shooting.
Yeah. So
and not that we don't shoot like that anyway. There was even a greater distillation process that happened where we're like, I think we're going to lose these 2 shots. We do this in a water and we go to that and we're out.
Yeah. There were scenes that were supposed to take half a day that we would shoot in 2 hours. Just because we had to get another scene that was taken out from another half a day that we had to get in another 3 hours earlier or later, So it just became, and like I said, a half day shoot of, okay, we're going to get all the stuff that we need in a half a day. Great. We have to get it in 2 hours. How do we get the bare minimum of what we need? And then, maybe we would finish the bare minimum of an hour and 45 and be like, we have 15 minutes to try to get some of these bonus shots,
But it's weird because while that was a hindrance in some respect, it also became sort of like the essence of the movie. Like the essence of the movie needed to be shot in this volatile weather where we were, I don't know. It just, Ian and I look at each other and we go, wow, this is the way it needed to be made. We love the aesthetic of the movie. We loved how it turned out. So we're like, I guess all these hardships are what needed to facilitate the movie.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's what you just keep doing in movies. There's so many times where something will go wrong, even if it's like an actor's schedule or a rainstorm or like, things happen. They're just going to happen on every movie. We've had just about everything. And I'll say that now, and then 25 new things will pop up on the next movie. But we haven't had everything. You feel like you've had, you feel like you're pretty battle weary, and then 25 more things pop up that you're like, how is that even possible that this has happened? Let's try to figure our way through that. And we always say that like directing a film is like 50% problem solving and 50% creative, so you spend half of the time putting out the fires of trying to get to the creative part, and then you spend the other half of the time actually getting to be creative.
Your guerrilla style filmmaking in the beginning has probably helped you to problem solve quicker and just go with the flow.
For sure.
Yeah.
100-fold. You're absolutely right, Jamie.
So 2 scenes kind of really stuck. I mean, the whole movie was beautifully shot. The acting was phenomenal. When I was trying to come up with some questions, I was thinking like, okay, two scenes. One was with Andy McDowell in the room with the hostage. I'll call him a hostage.
Perfect.
And then he's in a group with a bunch of men and they're getting ready to do some bad things. For me as a viewer, knowing what was going to happen or in my mind wondering how far will this go,
sure.
It was really hard to watch. So I was curious, did any of the actors have a hard time when you were actually filming this?
Well, first of all, everyone knew the intent of the scene, right? It's the ultimate catalyst of the movie that forces your protagonist to have a huge shift in their perspective and to start taking on actions that need to happen, right?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, when we're talking to actors and crew about, and even producers at that point, right, about what we want, what the intent of that scene is, everybody's on board, thankfully, or you're not shooting it, you know what I mean? Or you're not shooting it in that way. So everyone's on board could you just imagine the film without that scene? The stakes would be a lot lower when Cash goes out and is like, I've had enough. You know what I mean? And yes, there are other things that have happened that have been horrible and enough for him to say that's enough. But when we were doing our test screenings, the one thing we noticed is when that scene happens, people are like, that bitch has got to die. Like that's what people's attitudes were.
And that was the impetus of the scene for us. We said, this has to be so heavy duty and so impactful on the audience and her own crew that it's like, oh no, there's no coming back. This is the moment. This is the line in the sand. Anything is gone. She needs to be put.
I don't care how entertaining I thought she was in some of those scenes or how great I think she is as this matriarch. She needs to die. Like I'm done with her.
Yeah.
And that literally starts Cash's engine and unraveling of like, I'm done with this. I'm going hard. And I think because he does some pretty aggressive things as far as like, can you get on board with his revenge?
Yeah, he's trying to placate her,
And
then you realize like the placation is never going to work.
And I think you say it, for us, it was a point in the movie and in the script of like, everything is justified. All means are justified to get rid of this person, this horrible person,
And I understand that, when you're shooting it in chunks.
Yes.
So it isn't like the whole thing for somebody as me viewing it all put together. The intensity of it and wondering, oh my God, what's going to happen? There's no way out. Well, he tried, but then I just thought those are those moments where you're just like, oh my God, I can't watch. How do people in a room watch this? And, I thought it was really well done. The other scene was the gunfight scene. Because you have a lot of moving parts there. You've got the outside, behind cars, down a ditch, through a house.
Yeah.
I was just curious, how did you go about choreographing the scene and its moving parts? And I'm sure the storyboarding was,
everything.
a big part
So
of
critical.
it. But did you kind of envision how it was going to go, or did you block it and then saw how it would evolve?
It was a little bit of both. So Esh boarded the whole thing out.
Well, we have to, number one, get the location.
Right. Because when you write it, you don't know all the ins and outs of your location exactly, right? So we wrote the sequence, and then I'd say we found 90% of the stuff that we needed at that location and inside that location. And then we went to work on how do we fill the void of this other 10% or how do we and how do we enhance the 90% that we did find and change? And then you get the actors in the space, and they want to do different things and move in certain ways. And this is how maybe I'd do this, because you got to give them that freedom, because you don't want them acting inside of a cardboard box. You want them to be like, hey, here's the space you can work in, and feel free to go nuts.
Well, but we are. I mean, don't say we're very specific in that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There is a space. You can't run off down the ditch, the trees, because no one's down there. Why are you down there?
We're not going to have a camera down there. But I was saying, like, both of those both sequences you're talking about are so elaborately preconceived through the storyboards, through the camera work,
through the conversations with the actors.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, just regress 1 second to the scene that we were talking about previously. You'd be surprised how long the wonders were on that. Like, we let Andy go, and like she'd pretty much do like half the scene in one block. And then, so like there were certain things where we had to stop because of certain effects would happen. And you're like, okay, we have to stop here. But like Andy would get like, that's a long scene. It's like 2.5 minutes of per take, you know?
Yeah. And I would say the one fun thing about doing that, and I mean, I feel like she thought it was a plus, is that she really, like, by take 2, 3, 4, like, was humming, like, had a rhythm and had a build, and really was able to feel her character building and build those into all those moments into it. She had just conquered that moment with that character and its beats by like the 4th or 5th take, and it was beautiful, and it was just, you could feel the tension, and which obviously was getting everybody excited, you know, co-workers, co-actors, like cameramen. Like Orlando steps in, he knows where he's at with her. He knows what he's just seen her do, and it's been a whole flow for 2.5 minutes. So when he steps in and it's like,
like there's just, they crackle together. She and Orlando in those moments where they're right there. It was electric. To be in the room, people would be looking at each other like, oh my gosh, this is popping.
Yeah, and you could feel all that's on the screen. You could feel while we were in the room. We were just like, oh yeah, this is working.
Yeah.
And then to get to the action sequence, like we had a wonderful stunt team. I would say that we were limited on effects resets. So the beautiful blue bomber POS that we're driving around in that scene, like, it's
every window break we get one shot.
We get one shot.
Every time you put a hole in the door, you get one shot at that. And then at times in post, you can do like cover-ups, you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, it popped too early or it popped too late. And you can slide them. You can slide those around a little bit so that you can get away with shooting effect scenes with one take, because thank God the visual effects in post are so advanced now that it'll save your ass and look fantastic.
But Ian and I don't like to do any. We try to do as much in camera as possible for those action sequences. So we do blanks in the gun, because we want the actors to feel the gun, to see the muzzle flashes, the reciprocations of the rifle,
we want the smoke.
Yeah, there's just something about that helps the actors get into the mood, right?
And when you try to add it in later, it just kind of looks a little pantomime-y. You know, it doesn't look. You can't feel it in the whole body. You know, you can't feel it in the space.
I mean, there's just something too when you're hunkered down behind a car and the windows are exploding.
Yeah,
you're just, like, that's a visceral experience for an
body is reacting in a very different way, at stress-wise, and it's on your face and it's in your body and how you're holding yourself and carrying yourself, than if you had to pantomime what you think that might feel like when it was happening.
But it is very. I made a wonderful stunt team. Tim and his team did a fantastic job throughout that whole sequence, because like that last action sequence is like 35 minutes.
Yeah, right.
All the way to the very end. You know, it's like people are like, oh, that last action sequence, like, the last 40 minutes of the movie.
No, I mean, so well done. So well done. You know, you work with amazing talent over the years. Mel Gibson, Andy McDowell, Orlando Bloom, and a whole bunch more. I was just curious how you guys approach your actors in getting what you need and want, but also working with what they need and want. If you don't mind, do you want to talk about a couple different actors that you've worked with and how you needed to approach them and what they needed to move in and out of a scene?
Sure. I think the first part is like, no two actors are the same, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you sit out there and you try to figure out how we're all going to collaborate the best. There's actors. There's two extreme actors, right? There's the actors that feel like they need to be on the discovery journey, so it needs to feel fresh for them. They need to feel like they're discovering it along the way. And then there's the other side of that diametric opposed, where it's like Just tell me where you need me to hit the mark
And what the
where I need to look, when you want me to say the line, what you want my face doing, right? Those are the two diametrically opposed.
I mean, there's a ton in between, right?
But like, and every one of those, every actor skews sort of like in between those somewhere.
I remember when we were working with Danny Glover on Waffle Street, one of the things early on that we had to understand is that he wanted to make sure that he was gonna be okay with because he had worked on a couple of independent films before where he wasn't like, let's say they did 3 takes and he was like, I want another one. They were like, oh, we don't have enough time, Danny. You know what I mean? Like, shit, I wanted another one. And so we had a conversation early with him that we were let in on that while just talking to him. And we were like, well, hey, we're never going to leave a scene until you feel good. And so we would finish and say, cut, after whatever, 3 or 4 takes that we thought we had gotten it. And we'd look to him and we'd say, you feel good? And he'd be like, give me one more. Or he'd be like, nah, I'm good. You know, and we would always just make sure with him, especially, that's what made him secure and happy and giving his best on every take and comfortable with us, is that he knew we weren't going to quit on him. You know what I mean? That he was going to get what he needed out of the scene as well. But that was just one example with him.
But on the other side of that
I like
coin,
that.
there's actors that just want 1,000 takes.
Yeah.
And you have to stop it at some point and be like, no, we had
Right.
it. I promise you we had it.
Yeah, that's happened before too. It comes down to do they
trust you?
Do they trust you? And a lot of that's built early, right? Do you understand what you're shooting? Do you understand the material? Do you understand the tone? Do you understand the dialogue and the scenes that you've written? Because a lot of times these actors will come to you and say, just litany, like hit you with a litany of questions. And it's not necessarily because, sometimes it is, that they're trying to discover. A lot of the times it is they're trying to find out if you're on the same page as them. Like, because they're sometimes taking the character in certain directions that may not be on the page. Most great actors do that.
They make it their own, right? There's an interpretation.
Right.
Yeah. And so a lot of that questioning is like, hey, are we on the same page, or are we going to have a problem when we start shooting and this is going to be loggerheads?
I mean, I would say this, like, if like on that scale, right? Like, Walton's more on the discovery side of that equation, and John Hawkes is more on the tell me where I need to hit and how to catch my light side of that equation.
And then
I
feel
could
like
see that.
Mel was a bit of an amalgam of both, because there was like one scene where it was the one where he's leaving to go do Christmas, right? He's leaving to go deliver presents, and he's having that discussion with Marianne, Ruth, his wife, and she's like, "You're not happy. Like you need to like, what do you?" And he's like, "I gotta go. I gotta get out of here." And he tries to get the book from her, and he walks out. And I remember before we shot that scene, Mel's like, "How does this scene work? I don't understand the button on it. I don't understand the button on it." And we're like, "Well, what do you mean? What did?" And we talked about it for a while. And then he's like, "Okay, well, walk it through with me. And then we walked through the scene with him, just the blocking of it.
And I had them record the rehearsal
and how we were going to finish it. And then he just watched it back, and he was like, "Oh, it's how you have it blocked.
Yeah.
How you have it blocked where I ended a close-up is why the button works. Fucking beautiful."
Yeah, he's like,
I'm in.
Brandon works. You never makes a shot.
You guys got this. And from there on, you know, we would have quick shorthand discussions with him because he felt like we had a handle on it. You know what I mean? Every actor's different, and we've never had a bad experience with an actor. They're just all different. And like I said, like, it may take us a day or two of shooting at the worst to figure out
How I best collaborate.
what the best way to work with that actor is at times. Because there have been times when you're on set and like the first day you're like, that I didn't quite feel like we were all synced up. Like, and then Esh and I'll chat for like an hour afterward, and then be like, okay, well, let's go talk to that actor tomorrow and bring that to them and start talking to them about it, because I think that's what not necessarily the problem was, but that's why we're not just flowing like water. And then Esh and I will go up, have a conversation, and even if it wasn't what we thought it was, it will work it out. Because I remember we had a similar moment with Julie Gonzalo on Waffle Street. We had just a day where it wasn't flowing like water. And then we went and talked to her that night afterward, and we're like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of this? And she was like, well, I kind of need this, and I want this. And we're like, fucking great. We love that. And she's like, okay, great. And then from there, boom, we were all on the same page. And that's really what it is. You just get on the same page with these folks, and not everybody is on the same page at all the time. So it's like, you know, the page we're on with Lafferty is a different page we're on with Mel, is a different page we're on with Julie, is a different page you're on with Danny, with Goggins, it's just everybody works differently. So you just got to figure that out and then be like, okay, I got this.
I think one thing also we've learned too is we don't like to over talk stuff. So we'll get in there and
Unless they want it.
yeah, I mean,
Unless they want it. But usually these are professional actors. They gotta handle it.
yeah, you'll get in there, you'll help answer any questions they have in the pre-production during the read-throughs and all that stuff. And then when we get to the set, we let the actor have a couple takes before we get in there and start meddling and like giving feedback or anything like that, because you want us, and we've been in like some of the earlier films, we would get in there too early, start monkeying around with stuff, and then you're like, oh wow, they had it like right off the top, and we adjusted it out of them, you know. So it's like you want to give them a couple takes in the zone that they think the movie should be in, and then we'll go in there and make some whatever tweaks or feedback we want to give them after.
And the one thing that we've noticed as well as we've made more movies is that, like Ash was saying, like you don't necessarily know, you think you know on the day what takes you're going to be editing from. But a lot of times you get in that editing room and you're like, oh, it was take 3 and 1. Those are the 2 takes. I don't get in the editing room and you're like, we're only using take 5. I don't know what the hell happened. Like,
or we're using like 30 seconds out of this one, 2 seconds out of that one. Like, I don't know how in the day when they had to like print certain takes and they were stuck with only those takes, how that worked. Because we use pieces of every take in our edits most of the time. Yep.
Oh, wow. Well, and that leads me to the editing. So how do you work and flow with the editor? I mean, do you, is the editor cutting while you're filming, or do they give you a rough cut, then you come in? Do you meet in person? I know that you have had Trayton Lee.
Yeah, that's us.
That's us. That's both of our middle names.
Oh,
basically.
I thought that was a person.
No, it's tricky. Sorry, we just didn't want to put our credit on everything. It looks a little unknown.
Didn't want to be Eshom Nelms, Ian Eshom Nelms, you know, because it gets a lot. You're just like, did anybody else work on this movie?
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So then how do you work? I mean, do you, is one of you the main editor? Did you do it did you work in Avid?
We work at Premiere.
Oh.
Because we came from Final Cut Pro 7. And so when Final Cut 10 came out, we were like, it doesn't, 10's great but it's kind of too automated. We were like, just, I don't know, for us, 7 was like a thing. And then Premiere was like Final Cut Pro 8. It was like the continuation, 7.5 or whatever you want to do. So it felt the closest to 7 that we liked. And that's where we've been at. And like, there's just different stuff now. Like DaVinci has some interesting stuff that we want to work with. But
Resolve has some interesting things on it.
But that's what we cut everything in is Premiere. And we do it together. We have 2 editing stations set up in the same room. They're usually facing each other. So Ian's in front of me and I'm by there with the monitors. And we'll edit a scene. We divvy up the scenes. We'll say Ian's going to edit. This is arbitrary, but like 5 minutes, scenes 1 through 5, and I'll do 6 through 10. And when Ian finishes a scene, he's like, "Hey, come take a look at this," and I'll bounce over and I'll watch the scene. And then if I have ideas, I'll give them to him. If I'm like, "Hey, give me a few minutes with this scene," and maybe I'll take over the controls, and he'll go jump on my editor machine and do some stuff on mine. Like,
we literally edit the stuff and then kind of swap chairs. And then on the final passes, we're sitting next to each other. One person's working the board.
Yeah.
And we're just on one machine. Unless it's like a couple of quick fixes or something.
But I really don't understand. So, and maybe they're there for the entire process, but I don't understand how other filmmakers don't edit their own movies. Because these have always done it. And for us, like when we get done with a movie, we'll come back. Ian takes 1 week off. I'll take a little bit more time than that and just dive right into the edit. And, we watch every second of what we shot over again and reassess
even the pre-roll and the post-roll, like, because we've used stuff out of that before.
Yep.
Like, okay, like there's like
actors just staring off into space or like doing this like thing where they're preparing and you're like, oh wow, they're really in a zone right there, and you'll use that in the edit.
You can see it and it works really well sometimes when you're editing it into the scene.
And if you haven't seen that footage. Yeah. And you're just a filmmaker that comes in and you're like, hey, show me the edit. Well, you don't know what exists because it's been, months since you saw it on the day.
And whether you like what the editor has done or not, you don't know what your options are. So it's confusing to us to not understand. Even if you've looked at the footage, like you haven't seen it in action. You haven't seen it cut up against other things. I don't know if you have enough of a feel. I wouldn't.
Look, people do it. There's amazing movies made every day with that process, but it's just hasn't been our process yet. And I'm sure we could figure it out. But for us, it's like, man, how do you don't know there's that moment when that actor is just staring off into space or like, you kind of forget the varying tones of performance that you have. Like, oh, we could dial back the emotion because we shot 3 different takes where they were at different states, So
Yeah.
for us, it's such a critical part of that process.
Well, and also you're multi-talented. I do the same thing. I write, direct, and edit my own films. I just couldn't see having somebody else do it because I love it. I love the editing process. So
it's where the whole thing comes together. Like, you have to have your hands in there.
And like that's the movie. That's what the movie is made, is like when you're putting those images juxtaposed and like sculpting performance. I don't know how you don't do that as a filmmaker. It's really peculiar to us. Like,
it's also really interesting, right? How 1 or 2 frames really matters at times. You're just like, oh, a little less, a little more, perfect. Yeah, literally monkeying with a frame or 2 at the end, at the very, very end. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why, but I just want to. It's so crazy that some of that, like, and then like we've literally had a few frames fixes that has fixed things. You know what I mean? Like, monkeyed with a couple of frames that have fixed things for people because they're like, I really felt him there. And you're like, oh, I just add a little bit more, and you give them like a couple frames more. They're like, oh, I really felt it perfectly. Or they're like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like we're wallowing in it. You cut a couple frames, and they're like, perfect. Wow, that was a performance. You're like, crazy.
Yeah.
Right. But it is important, the pre-roll and the post-roll. I mean, I see so many times where somebody, or when I edit other people's films, and they'll say cut, and I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. I'll just take past the cut because they're in a moment, or they don't let people walk out of a room or something. They cut right in frame, and it's like, why didn't you just let them walk through and
give me a transition? I'll tell you this, like, I don't know, everyone does this, but we've had assistant editors pass us the project, and in their diligence, they've clipped the takes right when you say action and right when you say cut. And we're like, no, we need to see everything. Don't do that. Like, like the second that camera turns off, I don't care if there's sound or not. Like, so the second it turns off,
and we need every frame of that thing.
And we reassess.
Well, that's a good note.
Yeah,
that's a good note for people. Yeah,
it's wild. I don't know how people don't do that.
No, I will say once in a while, like I think on almost every movie we've had an assistant editor that's organizing the footage for us so that we can sort of hopefully. There's definitely a lot of organization that happens once you finish the film, but land as hot as possible. So there's not sitting there syncing sound and like doing all these things that are...
And that happens while we're shooting.
A giant pain in the ass. And then we do encourage those assistant editors to take passes at scenes sometimes, especially if it's like... We will do it as well. We'll take passes at some action scenes to make sure we have all the pieces. Especially if we're like, okay, this is the last day we're at this location. We got to make sure we have all this stuff.
Like, I know we were doing like a soft assembly of the action sequence in Red Right Hand just to make sure we had it all because we were shooting there and we had a limited time. I was like, we weren't going to be able to go back and grab stuff.
And I remember on Fatman, we were super duper busy and we had the assistant editor rough together.
Did a great job.
And we said, can you just make sure you get, because a lot of times what we didn't want was him taking a full, like 1,000% pass on how the movie was going to run. We wanted to make sure we had the shots. So we were like, can you make sure you have the shots in there, even if it seems like, oh, I'm putting this shot in here because the directors just want to see it in there and I wouldn't have normally put that in the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, just make sure we know we have all these shots.
And then they would have the storyboards, so we're like, hey, like, just kind of follow the boards because that's what we're shooting to. Like, we shoot to edit. And I do think that's a big part of it too. Like, editing informs your photography. So like, okay, I know I need this slit bit and this bit.
And we give ourselves outs too, right? So it's like, or options, not outs, but options. So it's like you're shooting an action scene and you're like, we're probably going to cut right when he swings at him or whatever, and cut at the other angle as the punch or the whatever comes through the other side. That's a typical way to do it. But there's times when you catch it just right and you can hold and stay in that shot and the punch looks amazing. So, or the whatever looks amazing, the action moment. And you want to hold that. You want to keep that because it's like, you didn't cheat. You got it great. You know what I mean? Those non-cheat moments you want to keep. So you'll run it a little long just in case you nail something and you want to cut a little later, you know, in it.
No, it's interesting.
This is kind of a different question I thought about is, so you've been on the interview circuit for this film. I was just wondering, is there a question that you wish people would ask you about the film that they haven't asked?
It's early on, so I don't know that anything like kind of like jumped to my mind.
Yeah, you're catching us early, so I'm trying to figure out if there's anything that I'm always really pumped to talk about that no one talks about.
I mean, I think you nailed it, right? Like, crafting those scenes, you know, we could talk about one scene for an hour. Like, it's just like, if we really drilled into it, right? And it was like, spoiler alert, we're going to just dig into how we did that, like this scene.
Because there's so many different things happening, right? And there's so much pre-production that goes into all these scenes of prepping it, and then what actually happened on the day, and what magical moments you found on the day, what magical moment the actor happened to come up with on the day and in the moment, or some happy accident happened that you kept that changed other things down the road. Yeah, it's such a fun, hard medium to work on, because it's almost like there's so many possibilities that it gets confusing sometimes, or complicated sometimes, or like which option should I take? You know what I mean? There's so many ways to put a scene together.
Ian and I'll cut scenes and we'll have like 7 versions.
Yeah. And then it's just like a whittling down of what, and that's the confusing part. You're like, okay, we have 7 versions that pretty much work. Like, how do you come up with?
But it's like, we'll take like the first 30 seconds of that version, 10 of that. That's how you do well.
You take gold from every one of them and see if you can mesh them together. And sometimes there's a little jerry rig that happens in the middle of something to make it work, or to get those golden pieces together. But that's what we really strive for, is finding the gold in all those scenes and keeping as much gold as you can. Because there's nothing more. Because a lot of times you'll edit something some way and you only have one side of something till a certain point, and you can't transition into that golden moment. So you got to find a way to do it. But yeah, that's what we really strive to do in every scene, is find those gold.
I will say, there's like, as long as you never quit, there's always a way to edit a successful scene.
I agree.
You could find it somewhere, even if you have to like cut it down to like one person nodding. Like there's a way to figure it out.
Well, I remember
don't give up.
In Small Town Crime, we put the film together. And there was this amazing moment that was happening in the screenings, whereas we were getting favorable reactions to the film. It was just the first like 15 minutes of the film, we were trying to solve, like, how do we nail this perfectly? We hadn't really nailed it perfectly. We just kind of feel, because people were kind of like, and we'd actually written this really long intro that was kind of like a 70s style Dirty Harry intro, where you you cold open with the villain, and you don't give the villain away, but it's like a lot of like, They hand the bag off. There's a little bit of a dial. They hand the money off. There's a money hand off to the guy with the tinted window that you don't see his face. The gloved hand comes out, grabs it, and is like, "All right, we'll take care of him." It was that kind of scene, that we cut out early. We didn't think we needed it, and then when we were putting it together, we were like, "Oh my God, like we needed that scene." And then when we got into the screening process, everyone was like, "I feel like I wish I either saw the bad guys a little earlier, or like that was the scene we cut out, the bad guys earlier, and to give me some kind of grounding with, okay, there's a villain here, and this is the kind of movie it is." Or I wish, that this other moment kind of happened later, and that was the moment that I kind of got the idea there was that villain lurking around, and we were like, oh, okay, and we thought up.
Through a screening process,
through many screenings, probably about 20.
We got the note.
We got the note, and then figured out the note behind the note, and figured out the fix was like, oh, if we go out and do reshoots, and we just find a car that looks close enough to the villain's car, and get in the back seat and shoot the back of the 2 actors' heads, who are a friend of ours, and they will come out and do this day for us, for a pittance, thank goodness. We just need one shot. And we just need them turning to each other and turning back around, and we can put whatever dialogue we want under them. And then we that shot ended up saving the first 15 minutes of the movie, to where it ended up once we did that transition and cut the first 10 minutes.
But yeah, it plugged that hole.
It plugged that hole up, and it made everybody watch the movie and go, yeah, that's how it feels like it should have gone. You know what I mean? Like you weren't sitting there wondering if there was another scene missing, or maybe we could do something different,
I love editing. It's just like making it all work and making it make sense and stuff.
We also do bring in usually someone to give us so when we get done editing the movie, we like to bring in an outside editor just to go through and give us ideas.
And on the last 4 movies, we've just made sure that was allotted in the budget. That there was like, okay, hey, look, we're gonna do our pass on it. We're gonna get it to where we're super pumped about it. And then we want to bring in someone for a couple of weeks to just
throw ideas.
Someone really good to come in for a couple of weeks and just say, hey, here's another look at this. And the cool thing that happens is on something that you were like warm or lukewarm on that you put together, but that was the only way you could think of putting it together, they'll come up with some golden moment possibility. Because that's what you do, right? You say, hey, here's the handful of moments that I'm not 1,000% happy with. I wish we could have found something better. And then here's the rest of the film. And then I don't know, there was a couple of scenes in this last one that Esh and I were like, well, don't even touch that scene because we think we nailed it. And then he did an even better job on it. So
you hear so many people doing this, right? Like Soderbergh does it. Everybody, like, and, like, man, there's a reason all these successful filmmakers are doing this.
Yeah, because it's like you get somebody that's what they do for a living. They are an editor, and they are constantly solving people's problems or thinking up cool ways to do things. And you just want to get that look. You're not going to keep all of it, but you're going to keep the gold.
Any last thoughts you want to share before we close?
No, just so grateful to spend your time with us today and chatting about movies and all the process. It's exciting.
It's fun. It's fun to do, right? It's really fun to do.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. This was great. A lot of information, and just so excited to have you. I appreciate it.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram @TammyMcGarrow. Until we meet again, what's your story?